Imagine this, 120 luxurious homes popping up on your property like mushrooms after a downpour. The HOA president is smirking, and lawyers in their expensive suits are laughing at your rookie mistake. But they missed one crucial thing. I'm a forensic accountant with 15 years of expertise in property fraud. Oh, and by the way, where are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments. I'm sure you've got some wild HOA horror stories of your own. But here's what they didn't realize. Every single brick they laid was building their own prison. Let me take you through the insane way I turned their greed into a brilliant legal trap. It was the morning after I got back from a 6-month consulting gig in London, and let me tell you, Arizona's sun hit my face with a warmth that felt extra inviting. I'm Brian Jordan, 45 years old, and finally ready to settle down on the 50 acres that my Aunt Margaret left me. The Uber driver gave me some side glances through the rearview mirror as we rolled up to what should have been empty desert land. "Sir, are you sure this is the right address?" he asked, slowing down. My stomach dropped. There, in place of the wildflower fields that once belonged to my aunt, stood row after row of identical beige houses. 120 homes, all with pristine lawns and those HOA-approved mailboxes. I thought I was looking at some kind of suburban movie set. The Emerald Heights sign was mocking me, its gold lettering gleaming too brightly under the sun. I paid the driver, got out, and marched straight to the sales office, where a bubbly blonde realtor greeted me with a smile. "Welcome to Emerald Heights. Are you interested in our Phase 2 homes? We're already 70% sold," she chirped. I pulled out my property deed and asked, "I'm actually more interested in knowing why there are houses on my land." Her smile faltered for a second before it quickly returned. "Oh, you must be Mr. Jordan. Melanie Ross, our HOA president, has been expecting you. She mentioned you might have some confusion about the development agreement." The sales office was a palace of suburban opulence, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with glossy architectural renderings of future phases. Phase 2, apparently, was going to feature a golf course and country club on my land. Brittany, the realtor, fumbled with her computer, then nervously said, "Mrs. Ross told me to send you right up. Her office is on the second floor of the admin building." I glanced up at the gleaming glass building that looked more like a corporate headquarters than an HOA office, and I made my way toward it, scanning the development as I went. My forensic accountants, I cataloged every detail. Streets named after precious gems: Sapphire Lane, Ruby Court, Diamond Drive. Every house was a carbon copy of the one next to it, beige stucco with minimal trim variations. The landscaping was impeccable but completely lifeless. Every tree, bush, and blade of grass was perfectly in place, no room for anything out of order. I could feel the eyes of the residents on me as I walked past. They were out for jogs or walking their dogs, giving me suspicious glances like I didn't belong. Of course, I didn't. This was supposed to be my property. I finally met Melanie in her plush office. She was 52, with perfectly styled silver hair, and she greeted me with a smug smile that said she thought she had everything under control. She leaned back in her designer chair, her voice oozing confidence as she claimed the development was all legal and above board. But what she didn't know, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The trap was set, and she was already walking right into it. The predatory grin of someone who's clearly played this game before lingered on her face. Behind her desk, she had strategically displayed her Stanford law degree and a slew of civic awards, each one meticulously placed, almost as if designed to remind me who was in control. "Brian, so happy you could finally make it," she purred, pushing a hefty folder across the polished mahogany of her desk. "As you can see, we've sent multiple notices to your registered address about the development plans. When we got no response, we had no choice but to proceed as per the HOA bylaws, the same ones your aunt agreed to when Emerald Heights was established in 1998. She slid the folder open, revealing page after page of legal documents, certified mail receipts, public notices, everything meticulously in order. "All by the book," she said, as if she was presenting a trophy. I flipped through the papers, heart sinking with every turn, until I froze. The address listed 1223 Maple Drive. My aunt's old home, gone, demolished 2 years ago after her passing. A chill ran through me. "Registered address?" I whispered, my blood turning to ice. Melanie's eyes sparkled with satisfaction, her voice silky smooth. "It's the address we had on file. Every notice, every deadline, all sent to that address. All properly documented." She leaned back in her chair, looking far too comfortable. I understand this might be overwhelming, but the development is already a fait accompli. Perhaps we can discuss compensation for your cooperation. I met her gaze, noticing the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, a small but crucial tell, one I'd seen countless times during fraud investigations. Countless times during fraud investigations. You knew that address was no longer valid, I said quietly, my voice cold but controlled. Her smile never faltered. We're required to use the address on file. It's not our job to track down property owners who neglect to update their contact details. She pulled out another document, tapping it with her finger like a drumbeat. Your aunt signed this agreement in 1998. It clearly states that all official communication would be sent to the address of record. I stood up slowly, maintaining my poker face. Years of investigating financial fraud had trained me well. I'll need time to go over these with my attorney. Her smile only grew wider and more sinister. Of course. But I must warn you, fighting this would be costly and pointless. We have the full backing of Morrison. You've probably heard the name Keller and Associates, right? These were the powerhouse lawyers who obliterated 3 environmental groups last year, all trying to halt a pipeline project. As I was leaving their office, I couldn't help but overhear Melanie, the head honcho, saying to her assistant, "They'll fold, they always do." Now, I got to admit, there was something unnerving about the way she said it. She wasn't just confident, she was sure, like she'd seen this play out too many times before. As I walked back through the development, I started noticing things. Like the security cameras on every corner, the private patrol car making rounds, and the guarded entrance gate. This wasn't your typical housing development. It was more like a fortress. My aunt's once peaceful 50-acre property had transformed into a place where every movement, every step seemed controlled. I stopped at the spot where her favorite oak tree used to stand, the one she'd sit under for hours. Now, all that remained was a fountain, surrounded by benches bolted to the concrete. Later that night, I found myself alone in my hotel room, papers spread out, laptop open, doing what I do best, following the money. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Melanie than met the eye. Her confidence wasn't just arrogance. It felt like someone who'd been down this road before. I dove into public records, and within a couple of hours, I stumbled upon my first lead, Melanie Ross, formerly known as Melanie Ross Hutchinson. Her attorney registration was suspended in 2016 for, let's just say, creative conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, and misrepresentation. That definitely raised some eyebrows. And I hadn't even started to dig into the HOA's finances yet. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Heard you're back in town. If you want the real story about Emerald Heights, meet me at Java Junction tomorrow at 10 a.m. I grinned. In my line of work, anonymous texts usually meant one of two things. Someone had a guilty conscience or someone was out for revenge. Either way, they often had the juiciest details. I shot back a quick, "I'll be there," and went right back to my research. By 3 a.m., I'd mapped out 15 other properties that had mysteriously fallen under Emerald Heights control over the last 5 years. The pattern: elderly owners, out-of-state heirs, and always, notices sent to outdated addresses. Java Junction was a small, no-frills coffee shop on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where regulars knew everyone, and anyone who wasn't a local stood out like a sore thumb. It was the perfect spot for a clandestine meeting, just far enough from Emerald Heights to avoid any prying eyes, but busy enough to make surveillance difficult. As I took a seat, my mind was racing. This was just getting started, and the deeper I went, the more I realized how far they'd gone to cover their tracks. I walked in early, grabbed a black coffee, and settled into a cozy corner booth that had the perfect view of the entrance. The place was alive with the usual morning crowd, construction workers grabbing a quick bite before heading out, retirees deep in conversation, solving everything from world politics to their kids' college tuition. Exactly at 10 a.m., the door swung open. A young woman in a sharp navy suit entered, her eyes scanning the room with an air of uncertainty. The moment our gazes met, she gave a small nod and walked over to my booth. "Mr. Jordan," she said as she approached, "I'm Allison West. I believe I can help you with your situation." She slid into the seat across from me, setting down her briefcase with a slight tremble in her hands. Up close, I could see the stress etched into her face, the dark circles under her eyes, partially hidden by layers of makeup. This was a woman who hadn't been sleeping much lately. "I used to work for Melanie," she began, her voice low, almost as if she were afraid someone might overhear. When I graduated from law school, I thought I had it made. I was working for top attorney, a woman who had it all, brilliant, charismatic, everything I aspired to be. She paused, taking a breath before continuing. As she opened her briefcase, I could see the weight of what she was about to reveal. Then, I found out what was really going on. She slid a folder across the table, and inside were detailed documents, emails, financial records, memos, each one a piece of the puzzle she was laying out for me. The Emerald Heights HOA isn't just an HO, Allison said, her voice getting firmer. It's a front for a massive property acquisition scheme. Melanie targets distressed properties, twists HOA bylaws to make takeovers seem legitimate, and then flips the land with developers for a fortune. I leaned forward, scanning the papers she had handed me. The documents were shocking. Discrepancies began popping up about 6 months into her tenure. Properties were added to the HOA's jurisdiction without any authorization. Elderly homeowners were tricked into signing legal documents they didn't understand, and worst of all, forged signatures on critical paperwork. Her voice became more bitter as she spoke. When I confronted Melanie about it, she laughed. She told me I was being naive, that this is just how business works. That's when I realized I was in over my head. I looked at her, processing the gravity of what she was saying. So why come to me? I asked. Why not take this to the authorities? Allison gave a bitter laugh of her own. I tried, she said. But Melanie's got everyone in her pocket. Judges, city council members, even some people at the FBI. When I threatened to blow the whistle, she destroyed me. She had me blacklisted. No law firm in 3 states will touch me now. She's ruined my career. She pushed the folder toward me again. But I kept everything, proof, emails, records. And this, she tapped the folder, is what you need to see. I took the folder and looked at the page she was pointing to. This is an email chain between Melanie and her assistant from 3 months before you got the notice about the development, she said. Take a look at this exchange. She knew your aunt had passed away when she sent those notices. As I read the exchange, everything clicked. Melanie wasn't just cold, she was calculating. And Allison's story was about to unravel something far bigger than I had imagined. The old woman's gone, and yet her cold-blooded team is still pushing forward, sending out notices to non-existent addresses. It's almost like they're fishing in a pond that's completely dry. I read through the email chain, and with every word, my anger bubbled up. The sheer audacity of it all was staggering. The documents, damning. In the thread, Melanie and her partner in crime, Jim the Hammer Harrison, were scheming about how to rush the takeover of my land. Financial records revealed millions stashed away in offshore accounts. But what really caught my eye was a technical report on environmental assessments. What's this about soil contamination? I asked, my voice low with disbelief. And then Allison, her lips curling into a rare smile, finally spoke. That's your secret weapon. Turns out, Melanie had been so desperate to start construction that she skipped the crucial environmental testing. The land's polluted, Allison explained, her eyes glinting. Those houses, they're built on land that needed cleanup before anything could be built. Every single permit? Fraudulent. But the plot didn't end there. Allison slid another stack of papers across the table. Your aunt wasn't just a casualty in this. She had been fighting Melanie for years. These letters? Complaints to every regulatory body. She even filed reports with the State Bar Association. And here's a private investigator's findings. I flipped through the documents, instantly recognizing my aunt's handwriting. Letter after letter, she had been documenting every move, building her case against Melanie. She had seen through their lies long before I did. For the next 2 hours, Allison laid it all out. The HOA's plan was a well-oiled machine. They targeted properties with absent or deceased owners, then sent legal notices to addresses they knew were bogus. When there was no reply, they'd claim abandonment, exploiting a loophole in the original HOA charter. Then they'd partner with Jim Harrison's company, throwing up houses with substandard materials, all for a quick profit. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. You won't believe this, Melanie's been running the same scam on 15 other properties, pulling the same tricks to sell them off to the highest bidder before anyone had the chance to stop her. But then she met you. You're different. You have the knowledge to crack this wide open, and even more importantly, you showed up before she could complete her dirty work. Timing, as they say, is everything. Allison slid a timeline across the table, her fingers tracing the months as she spoke. Normally, Melanie waits at least a year after taking control of the property. By then, she's already sold off most of the units, creating a tangled mess of ownership so complex, no one can untangle it. But this time, you came in just 6 months in. She's managed to sell some, sure, but not nearly enough to make everything irreversible. And that's why she's panicking. I squinted, skeptical. Why should I trust you? I challenged, studying her face. This could still be some kind of elaborate setup. Allison didn't flinch. She met my gaze without hesitation. Because I'm the reason you inherited that land to begin with. Her voice was steady, unwavering. Your aunt. She was my mentor in law school. She saw exactly what Melanie was up to and knew she had to make sure someone could fight back. She made sure the land was left to you, the one person who could see what no one else could. She pulled out a folded letter, aged but familiar. Your aunt left this for you, just in case something like this happened. The handwriting was unmistakable, Aunt Margaret's familiar, flowing script. My fingers trembled as I read aloud. Dear Brian, if you're reading this, then Melanie Ross has made her move. I've watched her circle like a vulture for years, waiting for me to die. The land isn't just land. It's evidence. Look beneath the old oak tree by the creek. I've buried something there that will help you take her down. Trust Allison. She's one of the good ones. Love, Aunt Margaret. I folded the letter slowly, my mind racing. Looks like we've got some digging to do, I said, glancing up at Allison. She nodded, her expression serious. There's more, she added as we gathered our gear. Ellie's not working alone. She's part of something much bigger. This isn't just a one-property scam. This is a network that spans multiple states. The Emerald Heights model. It's been copied in Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. They're targeting retirement communities, areas where aging populations make them prime targets for exploiting property laws and HOA regulations. Your aunt figured it out, which is why she became such a threat. She wasn't just protecting her land, she was trying to expose a multi-state criminal empire. Armed with nothing but shovels and determination, we set to work that afternoon. Beneath the ancient oak tree, we uncovered my aunt's insurance policy, a waterproof box filled with original HOA documents, recorded conversations, and a diary that chronicled every suspicious thing she'd ever seen. But the real shocker came when we uncovered a set of geological surveys from 1997. The maps revealed something far more valuable than just land, natural gas deposits beneath the property. That's why Melanie wants the land so badly, Allison whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not just about the houses. She's planning to sell the mineral rights to Excelsior Energy for $50 million once she's got full control. I spent hours putting together a detailed timeline of Melanie's fraud. Every move, every lie. The pattern was undeniable, but patterns alone wouldn't cut it in court. I needed something more. I needed proof that would actually hold up, and I needed Melanie to walk right into the trap and incriminate herself. That's when the light bulb went off. Allison, how would you feel about playing a double agent? I asked. She shot me a look, one eyebrow raised. What do you mean? She replied, curiosity piqued. I laid it all out. Allison would approach Melanie with an offer she wanted back in, and she could help manage the whole Brian Jordan issue. Meanwhile, I'd play the overwhelmed heir, ready to settle for whatever chump change Melanie offered. The HOA meeting was set for the community center, a shiny new building that, thanks to my family's money, was about as welcoming as a high-end mall. The room was packed with residents, all of them giving me the stink eye as if I'd kicked their puppies. At the front, Melanie stood, glowing with power in her tailored suit. She was the picture of authority. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, she started, her voice as smooth as silk. As you know, we have a situation with the ownership claims made by Mr. Brian Jordan. She pointed at me like I was a naughty child in the back row. While we sympathize with his confusion, the facts remain. This development was legally built, and it was done in good faith. I rose to my feet, acting my part to perfection, my voice trembling just a bit for effect. I just want what's fair, I said, making sure to let the emotion seep through. My aunt left me this land, and now there are homes on it. I don't want to displace families, but surely some compensation is due. A few people in the room murmured in agreement, but most gave me cold, judgmental stares. Melanie flashed a smug, patronizing smile as she spoke next. Of course, Brian, she said, practically oozing condescension. We're prepared to offer you $200,000 for any residual claims you might have. That's more than generous, especially considering the development was approved through all the proper channels. I stared down at my papers for a moment, then looked up, letting the silence stretch. $200,000? I repeated, pretending to contemplate the offer. I glanced at the papers again, making it look like I was calculating the value in my head. The land's worth at least $5 million undeveloped. That got her. Her eyes narrowed for a second, just a flicker, but enough for me to catch it. Was worth, Mr. Jordan, she corrected, the change in her tone sharper than a knife. Past tense. The situation has changed. Suddenly, Jim Harrison, a massive guy with a golf course tan and an air of someone who spent more time hitting balls than working, stood up. He had that cocky attitude that screamed, I get things done, or I make people regret not doing them. Look, buddy, he drawled. You can take the offer, or you could drag this out for 10 years in court. Your choice. I let the silence hang in the air. Then, without saying a word, I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Everyone went quiet as the room was filled with the unmistakable sound of Melanie's voice. Well, of course, the old bat is dead. Melanie's voice echoed through the room. That's why I send the notices there. Brian Jordan's probably in London, sipping tea and eating crumpets. By the time he figures it out, we'll have everything locked down. The room fell dead silent. Melanie's face drained of color as she realized the game was up. The room was electric, filled with chaos as questions flew from every direction. The tension was palpable, and Melanie's complexion shifted from a deep crimson to a ghostly pale. That's not what I meant, she stammered, trying to salvage the situation. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I pulled out the real environmental reports, the ones Melanie had tried to bury. The data showed contamination levels 3 times the legal limit, and the families who had trusted this place were completely in the dark. The room's atmosphere instantly shifted from confusion to outrage. Now people were standing, demanding answers, their voices growing louder with every passing second. Jim Harrison, her right-hand man, tried to sneak out through the side door, but he ran straight into Connell Lewis. Connell, my childhood neighbor turned Emerald Heights resident, blocked his path. Not so fast, Jim, Connell said, his voice steady and unyielding. We all deserve the truth. Melanie, struggling to regain control of the situation, spat. This is insane. He's making all of this up. I'll be suing for defamation first thing tomorrow. But it was too late. Doubt had already started spreading through the crowd like wildfire, and it was clear no one was buying her story anymore. I wasn't finished yet. I pulled out more damning documents. Oh, and speaking of legal issues, I said, did anyone know the HOA funds have been used to cover Melanie's personal legal expenses in not 1, but 3 separate fraud cases? The room went silent. I wasn't done. And that construction company that built your homes? It's filed for bankruptcy twice, under 2 different names. The meeting descended into total chaos. Melanie bolted for her office, with Jim hot on her heels. But several residents didn't let me off the hook. They cornered me, eyes full of fear and anger. How far does this go? Asked the young father holding his baby close. Are our homes safe? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I'm working with the authorities to uncover the full extent of this. Your homes are structurally sound, but there are issues we need to address. I promise you, my fight isn't with you. It's with the people who've been stealing from all of us. That night, my phone rang. It was Allison. You won't believe this, she said. Melanie's panicking. She's moving money to offshore accounts. The scene begins with accounts and shredding documents. But here's where things get really interesting. Allison, all hyped up, calls someone she refers to as the senator. She tells him things are getting out of control, and I couldn't help but smirk to myself. Some people just can't handle their business. Allison's voice crackled with excitement as she told me, the FBI agent you contacted? He's really interested. Turns out, they've been building a case against Jim Harrison for money laundering, but they couldn't make the connection to Melanie until now. Right at that moment, my laptop chimed. A new email from an anonymous address popped up. The message was clear. Back off or things will get very unpleasant for you. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Attached was a photo of my house in Boston. No big deal, right? I forwarded it straight to the FBI and quickly texted Allison. Looks like we're rattling the right cages. Her reply was immediate. Melanie just offered me $1 million to steal your evidence and disappear. Want me to take it? I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Absolutely. Let's see how she plans to pay you. The next morning was chaos. Melanie filed an emergency injunction, claiming I was harassing the residents and spreading lies. But she made a massive mistake, one that would cost her dearly. In her panic, she included financial documents that actually proved everything I'd been saying. Her lawyer, a twitchy young guy who kept adjusting his tie, realized the blunder too late. Judge Patricia Reeves, known for her no-nonsense style, raised an eyebrow as she flipped through the file. Counselor, did you even read these documents before submitting them? Kevin Marsh, the young lawyer with a name tag that read Kevin Marsh, turned a deep shade of crimson. Your Honor, we filed these under extreme pressure. My client felt it was urgent to protect the community. Judge Reeves didn't let him finish. From what exactly? From learning the truth about their homes. She glanced at the bank statements, which showed consistent transfers from HOA accounts to offshore accounts. Is your client aware that financial disclosure in court filings is subject to perjury laws? Melanie, sitting at the defendant's table, was in full panic mode, urgently whispering to a senior partner who had just arrived. Richard Blackstone, the notorious Arizona real estate shark, smoothly stood up, trying to save face. Your Honor, if I may, there's been a misunderstanding about the scope of these documents. Judge Reeves wasn't having any of it. Mr. Blackstone, I don't care if you're replacing counsel. These documents are now public record. And they clearly show. While financial irregularities were mounting, Melanie was speeding through her plan like a cat on a hot tin roof. She had managed to sell 80 out of the 120 homes to unsuspecting buyers, rushing through closings at lightning speed. But rather than stopping her, I let her dig herself a deeper hole. Every single sale meant another victim, another person who could potentially sue her. And with each rushed closing, more paperwork errors piled up, providing even more proof of fraud. Allison was playing her part flawlessly, feeding me inside info while pretending to help Melanie cover her tracks. That afternoon, I headed to the county recorder's office with Patricia Nguyen, a forensic auditor I'd hired. Patricia was a specialist in real estate fraud and had worked on high-profile cases with the FBI. As we dug through the deeds and transfer documents, Patricia let out a low whistle. Brian, this is worse than we thought, she said, her finger tapping on a stack of papers. Look at these signatures. I leaned in, and Patricia pointed to the same notary's name on all of them. But there was a catch. The notary's license had expired 3 years ago. Every single one of these sales, they were legally shaky at best. I examined the documents more closely, and the timing was even worse. These closings had all occurred within just 72 hours. No legitimate real estate operation can process that many sales that quickly and with such glaring mistakes. Patricia nodded. This is textbook fraudulent conveyance. She's trying to create so many tangled property claims that no one will be able to untangle them. It's a classic asset protection move, but done so poorly that it's only leaving a trail of evidence. As the pieces fell into place, Allison kept feeding me info during our secret meetups. One afternoon, she slipped me a flash drive and whispered, she's getting more desperate. Now she's pressuring buyers to close without proper inspections, offering huge discounts for cash deals. Oh, and I think she's even forging signatures on disclosure forms. I copied everything off the drive before Melanie could destroy it, including a stack of emails where she explicitly instructed Jim to cut corners with substandard materials. But that wasn't all. Allison pulled out a folder labeled Confidential and handed it to me. Inside, there were HOA communications about something called Project Clean Sweep. Apparently, Melanie's been planning to demolish the original section of Emerald Heights, where your aunt's house used to be, and build a luxury resort, Allison said. She was going to use environmental contamination as an excuse to condemn the properties and force the owners to sell at below market rates. I could feel my blood boiling. So she pollutes the land, uses that pollution to push people out, and then profits from redeveloping the land? Allison nodded, her face grim. Exactly. And she's been using HOA funds to bribe off environmental officials to keep it all under wraps. The corruption was far worse than I ever imagined. By the time I wrapped up my day, I'd pieced together an elaborate flowchart of Melanie's operations, tracking the cash as it twisted its way through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. By evening, I connected the dots to 3 city council members, 2 state lawmakers, and even a federal judge. The web was clear. Melanie had built a corrupt empire that reached every level of government. But like any empire, it had its cracks. Networks are only as strong as their weakest link, after all. That evening, my phone rang. It was Special Agent David Chin from the FBI. "Mr. Jordan, we've been tracking this case for some time. We need to meet." 2 hours later, I found myself in a bland office building, staring at a wall plastered with photos and documents, an intricate web with Melanie and Jim at the center. "We've been investigating Harrison for 18 months, Chin said. But Ross has always stayed a step ahead, too careful, too smart, until now." He pointed to a photo of a distinguished man with silver hair. "Senator William Thornton. We believe he's been shielding their operations in exchange for campaign donations." The senator. I remembered Allison's intel. "That's the one," Chin nodded. "Your evidence could be the key to bringing this whole thing down, but we need you to take a big risk." He outlined their plan. I'd meet with Melanie, wearing a wire, and offer to settle things. The goal was to bait her into revealing the bigger conspiracy. "She's sharp," I warned. "She'll see right through it." Chan smirked, a cold look in his eyes. "That's why we're going to make her think she's winning." The trap was set for Friday afternoon. But by Thursday night, the entire operation nearly fell apart. Jim Harrison, smarter and more paranoid than we gave him credit for, sensed something was off. After hours, he cornered Allison in the HOA office, accusing her of being a spy. What started as a verbal confrontation quickly escalated when he grabbed her arm. What Jim didn't know was that Allison had been recording the entire thing on her phone. His threats, his admission that they had dealt with problems like Brian before, and the most damning moment, his bragging that the senator will bury all of you. Allison managed to break free and race straight to the FBI. By Friday morning, things took a turn for the worse. Jim had disappeared, along with $5 million from the HOA accounts. Melanie was in full panic mode now. Desperation made her reckless, and that made her dangerous. When I walked into her office that afternoon, wearing a wire under my shirt, there was no pretense of politeness. "What do you want, Jordan?" she snarled, her polished demeanor replaced with a raw survival instinct. "Let's talk." I leaned back, keeping my voice steady, but the words were like ice. "This is how it's going to go. You've made your fortune. You've sold most of the houses. I'll take 10 million, and I'll sign whatever you need me to." Her eyes flickered, a mix of disbelief and calculation. 10 million? You've lost your mind. But I saw the gears turning in her head. The math was working. 5 million, she shot back. "And you'll sign an NDA. You never speak of this again." I smirked, pretending to think about it, then shook my head. 8 million. And I want it in cash. Tonight. She laughed, but it was hollow forced. "Cash? What is this, some kind of movie?" But I could see it in her eyes. Cash meant no paper trail. Cash meant she could use the stolen HOA funds. I wasn't done. "I know Jim took the HOA funds," I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. "And I also know you have access to other accounts. Offshore. The Caymans, maybe." Her face went ashen. She tried to mask it, but it was too late. "How do you know that?" she demanded, her voice cracking. I smiled. She had already walked into my trap. "Here's the deal," I said, my tone cold and certain. "You'll pay me 8 million in cash. I'll disappear. And you'll pray that I stay gone." For a second, I thought she might try to push back, but then her shoulders slumped. "Tonight, 10 p.m. The old warehouse on Route 47. Come alone." By morning, the town was buzzing. Word of the missing HOA funds had spread like wildfire through Emerald Heights. People were panicking, clumping together, desperate for answers. I knew I had to act fast. I called a meeting at the community center. This time, the tone would be different. "I know you're all worried," I began, looking around at the anxious faces staring back at me. "You've put everything into these homes. Your life savings. And now you're afraid it's all slipping away." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The tension was thick. "But let me be clear," I continued, my voice stronger now. "My fight isn't with you. It's with Melanie Ross and Jim Harrison. You're the victims here. And you need to understand that I need your help." I laid it out for them, how Melanie had orchestrated a massive fraud, stealing from property owners, and how the homes were built on land that wasn't even legal. But the people themselves were innocent. They hadn't been a part of it. "I've got a proposition," I said, letting the weight of my words settle in. "If you're willing to testify, whether it's about the pressure to close quickly, missing inspections, or unusual fees, I'll make sure your ownership is never challenged. And any damages awarded will go into a fund to fix the environmental issues and protect your property values." The response was immediate, overwhelming. Almost every single homeowner agreed to step forward. Stories flooded in: fraudulent documents, threats, bribes. One elderly couple revealed that Melanie had convinced them to invest their entire retirement in a special HOA fund, promising them 15% returns. Another family found out their home inspection had been completed long before their house was even built. Each news story added another piece to the puzzle, another brick in the wall of evidence we were building. As I was getting ready for the warehouse meeting that evening, my phone rang. It was Melanie. "Change of plans," she said, her voice smooth but filled with tension. "I'll have someone deliver the money to your hotel." I could hear the anxiety in her voice. She was second-guessing everything, convinced it was a setup. "No deal," I shot back, my voice firm. "Face to face, or I go public with everything tomorrow morning." A thick silence hung between us, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. "Fine," she finally spat out. "But I'm bringing security." I smirked, the tension rolling off me. "Bring whoever you want. Just make sure you bring my money." The warehouse was massive, a cavernous shell that had once housed farming machinery. Now it stood eerily empty, the perfect backdrop for a secret rendezvous. I arrived early, scanning for possible escape routes and places to hide. The FBI had wanted to wire the building, but I had convinced them to pull back. Melanie would bolt at the first sign of law enforcement, and I needed her to stay in the dark. Instead of a wire, I wore the latest tech, a state-of-the-art transmitter capable of sending a signal even through thick concrete walls. At precisely 10 p.m., headlights cut through the dust-covered windows, signaling her arrival. Melanie stepped in, flanked by two massive bodyguards who looked like they could bench press a car with ease. She was carrying a duffel bag that looked like it could have weighed a ton. $8 million, she said, dropping the bag on the floor without a hint of hesitation. "Count it if you want." I opened the bag, pulling out stacks of $100 bills. "Looks about right," I said, nonchalant. "Now, about that NDA." She pulled out a document, pushing it toward me. "Sign it," she demanded. "Take your money and disappear." I raised an eyebrow. "Regret it like you did with Thomas Brennan?" Her face went white. Thomas Brennan, an investigative journalist who had been digging into HOA corruption 3 years ago, with a name she clearly hoped to forget. His death had been ruled an accident, but the truth was buried much deeper than that. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. "Really?" I said, pulling out my phone and showing her a photo. "Because I have an email where you discuss permanently solving the Brennan problem with someone named Victor." And that's when everything went sideways. One of her bodyguards lunged for his gun. In that instant, the warehouse doors exploded open. The FBI flooded in, guns drawn. Melanie screamed, her eyes wide in panic as she realized her escape had been cut off. There was nowhere to run. As the agents closed in and cuffed her, I couldn't help but smile. This was far from over, but at least the first move was mine. Her glare was pure venom as she hissed, "You set me up. You'll pay for this." I couldn't help but smile, knowing it wasn't me who was going to pay. It was her. "Oh, and that money you brought, it's marked." Every serial number was recorded when Jim pulled it from the HOA account. As I led her away in handcuffs, she shot me one last warning. "You have no idea what you're getting into. They'll come after you." I watched as the FBI car disappeared into the night, wondering who they were. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, justice had finally been served. The news spread fast. Melanie's arrest was all anyone could talk about. By morning, 3 city council members had stepped down, and Senator Thornton's office issued a statement denying any involvement in the Emerald Heights scandal. Of course, I thought, just like you deny knowing about those campaign contributions, right? The courtroom for Melanie's preliminary hearing was packed. The government had slapped her with 37 charges: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, racketeering, the works. Meanwhile, Jim Harrison had been snatched up at the Mexican border with a fake passport, and the FBI had rolled him faster than I expected. In exchange for a lighter sentence, he agreed to testify against Melanie. But the biggest shock came when a prosecutor dropped a bombshell. They were investigating a sitting U.S. senator for corruption. The media went wild, of course. I took the stand on day 3, walking the court through everything I'd uncovered in my investigation. That's when Richard Blackstone, the defense attorney known as the Shark for his ruthless tactics, made his move. In his sharp $3,000 suit, he strolled toward me, his grin almost predatory. "Mr. Jordan," he started smoothly, "isn't it true that you've been holding a personal grudge against my client? That this entire investigation is nothing more than a scheme to extort money from a successful businesswoman." He thought he had me, but I wasn't biting. "No, counselor," I replied calmly, staring him down. "I didn't orchestrate this to get money from anyone. I exposed a criminal enterprise that's been stealing millions from innocent people. The only extortion here was perpetrated by your client." Blackstone's grin didn't falter. He came at me with more questions, suggesting I wasn't the forensic accountant I claimed to be. "You wore a wire and pretended to accept a bribe. How is that not entrapment?" he challenged. Allison, sitting at the prosecution table, quickly passed a note to the lead prosecutor. He jumped up, objecting. "Your Honor, the defendant initiated the bribe attempt, as shown by the evidence." Judge Carter upheld the objection, but Blackstone didn't relent. For the next hour, he tried to paint me as a cold, calculating opportunist. But every time he attacked, I had more evidence of Melanie's crimes to present. Then came the moment that turned everything on its head. I stood up, addressing the court. "Your Honor, I'd like to draw your attention to the case of Whitmore versus Henderson, 1896. Blackstone leapt out of his chair, shouting, "Relevance, Your Honor. We're not here to discuss century-old property disputes." But Judge Carter leaned in, clearly intrigued. "I'll allow it." "Proceed, Mr. Jordan." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick leather-bound law book. A bit theatrical, but effective. In Whitmore versus Henderson, the state Supreme Court ruled that any structure built on private land without the owner's permission becomes the property of the landowner, regardless of the builder's investment or intent. The courtroom fell dead silent. This precedent, I continued, was upheld in Morrison versus State, 1952, and again in Consolidated Developers versus Williams, 1998. I watched as Blackstone frantically flipped through his notes, trying to find something to refute me. "Your Honor, this is absurd," he barked. "These are outdated laws that haven't been applied in decades." But Judge Carter leaned in even further, clearly paying attention. "Actually, Counselor, Whitmore versus Henderson was cited just last year in Peterson versus Maricopa County. Please continue, Mr. Jordan." I couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, Your Honor." By combining these precedents with the evidence of fraud, we can establish that not only did Miss Ross commit criminal acts, but she also inadvertently transferred ownership of all 120 homes to me as the rightful landowner. The entire prosecution team looked stunned. Even Allison, who had been with me every step of the way, appeared surprised, though we had discussed this strategy. Blackstone, on the other hand, was red-faced with anger. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're seriously suggesting that my client built 120 homes, only to lose them because of a technicality?" But the truth was clear. Melanie's empire was crumbling, and I had just delivered the knockout punch. The courtroom was silent, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning of a much bigger story. The tension in the courtroom was thick, every eye locked on the confrontation. Melanie shot a venomous look at me, her voice seething with anger, but I didn't flinch. "It's not a technicality, Counselor." I shot back, my voice firm. "It's the law, the same law your client tried to twist for her own benefit." As if on cue, Melanie grabbed Blackstone's arm, her whisper cutting through the room so sharply it was almost a hiss. "Do something. Call the senator. If I go down, I'm bringing everyone with me." The judge slammed the gavel down, the sound echoing through the room. "Order. Ms. Ross, I will not tolerate threats in my courtroom." But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Hours later, Senator Thornton's office was raided by the FBI. It was clear things were about to get even uglier. The trial pivoted to the environmental fraud charges. I laid out the undeniable proof that Melanie had bribed inspectors to overlook dangerous contamination on land that should never have been developed. This was the kind of negligence that put people's lives at risk, all in the name of profit. The irony wasn't lost on me. I leaned in, addressing the court. In her rush to turn a quick profit, Ms. Ross has only made the situation worse. She's now personally responsible for a cleanup that could cost upwards of $30 million, thanks to the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. Blackstone, as desperate as ever, tried to counter. Your Honor, even if we accept Mr. Jordan's take on property law, and we don't, surely the homeowners who bought in good faith have some rights here. Perfect. The opening I'd been waiting for. Absolutely, Counselor, I said with a nod. That's why I'm proposing a settlement. We'll buy each home back at its original price, minus any fraudulent charges or kickbacks. Every cent of the profits will go to a remediation fund and a restitution program for the victims. Judge Carter looked up, a rare smile breaking his usually stern demeanor. A remarkably equitable solution, Mr. Jordan. Mr. West, does your client agree to this? Allison stood up, every bit the professional. We do, Your Honor. My client's primary concern has always been justice for the victims of this fraud, not lining her pockets. The judge then turned to the prosecution. Does the government have any objection to this framework being included in a potential plea agreement? The lead prosecutor stood and nodded. No objection, Your Honor. In fact, we believe this approach could be a model for resolving similar cases of systematic HOA fraud. Melanie could no longer contain herself. She jumped to her feet, her chair crashing to the floor. This is a kangaroo court. You're all in on it. Her voice echoed off the walls. The senator promised me protection. He said the fix was in. Her outburst sealed her fate. The judge wasted no time in ordering her removal from the courtroom and revoking her bail. As the chaos died down, I presented my final piece of evidence, an intricate financial analysis showing how Melanie had used a network of shell companies to launder money through the HOA. Your Honor, this chart demonstrates that, over the past 5 years, $47 million flowed through these accounts, with patterns consistent with classic money laundering operations. I could almost see the disbelief in the room. With the forensic analysis complete, the judge called for a recess to review the evidence. When court reconvened, the ruling was swift and decisive. The court was packed as the judge delivered the verdict. The evidence was undeniable, and Ms. Ross had already sealed her fate with her own admissions. I find sufficient grounds to proceed with all charges, the judge declared firmly. Furthermore, I am granting the plaintiff's motion regarding property ownership, subject to the proposed restitution framework. As we walked out of the courtroom, Allison looked at me with a mix of awe and curiosity. That was incredible. How long have you been planning this? She asked, her voice full of admiration. I gave her a sly smile. Since the day I learned about Whitmore versus Henderson. Sometimes the best trap is the one your enemy sets for themselves. Melanie had been so obsessed with exploiting technicalities that she never thought those very technicalities could come back to bite her. Her arrogance had blinded her to the simplest truth. Her own actions had created the perfect opening. The evening news didn't waste any time covering it. The footage of Melanie, handcuffed and screaming about conspiracies, was everywhere. The headlines screamed, HOA president's greed turns into her downfall. Landmark case sets new precedent. Fast forward 3 months, and it was time for Melanie's sentencing. The courtroom was packed again, but this time there was a different energy in the air. The judge's words cut through the tension like a knife. Mrs. Ross, you betrayed the trust of hundreds of families, corrupted public officials, and showed an utter lack of respect for both the law and basic human decency, the judge said, his voice cold. This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. As the gavel came down, I couldn't help but think of Aunt Margaret. Her plan had been flawless, and I had played my part perfectly. She'd always known that the right angle would win this battle. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge wasn't just living well. It was watching them fall because of their own arrogance. Over the next 6 months, everything came together like a masterful symphony, each note falling into place. Melanie was finally where she belonged, behind bars. And when it was her turn to speak at the sentencing, she was nothing like the powerful woman who had walked into that courtroom months before. I let greed blind me to the harm I was causing, she whispered, her voice trembling. I destroyed lives, families, and communities. I can never undo the damage I've done. Her words echoed in the room, but it was too late. The damage had already been done, and her downfall was complete. It all started with a single act of courage. But I hope my cooperation helps bring down others like me, she said, knowing her testimony would tear down a system that stretched across 12 states and pulled in over 200 corrupt officials. Her words were the key to unraveling a massive web of deceit, and Jim Harrison? Well, he walked away with a lighter sentence, just 15 years, thanks to his early cooperation. In exchange, he handed over financial records so detailed that they led to the recovery of more than $30 million in stolen funds. But the real bombshell was still to come. Senator William Thornton's trial was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The man who once commanded the halls of power now found himself in the defendant's chair, facing charges that could lock him away for life. His downfall was nothing short of Shakespearean, a rise from political titan to the public symbol of corruption. And as for the 120 homes caught up in this mess, the solution was surprisingly simple and far more elegant than anyone could have predicted. Each home was returned to its rightful owner, but with a twist. They paid exactly what they had originally paid, minus all the kickbacks and fraudulent fees. The environmental cleanup, well, that was funded entirely by the criminal profits we'd recovered. And while the land's value soared once news spread of the natural gas deposits beneath it, I had already put a plan in place. The mineral rights were secured in a community trust, with profits earmarked for local schools and environmental protection programs, ensuring the next 50 years would be a bright future for all. Connell Lewis, my childhood neighbor and former HOA victim, was elected president of the new community association. His first move? Rewrite the bylaws to guarantee transparency and to require a supermajority vote for any big decisions. Never again, he told me one morning over coffee. We're going to build a real community, not a scam. The residents, once divided and suspicious of one another, now celebrated their shared experience with block parties. The community garden blossomed right where Melanie's office had once been, symbolizing new beginnings. Then there was Allison West, the young lawyer who had once been blacklisted. Her career took a complete 180, transforming her into the country's leading expert on property fraud. She launched her own law firm, dedicated to protecting homeowners from corrupt developers and predatory HOAs. Within a year, she had expanded to 3 states, with a waiting list of clients eager for her expertise. I owe it all to your aunt, she told me one day. She saw something in me worth saving. We discovered more of Aunt Margaret's hidden letters in the property, years of documentation on Melanie's wrongdoings, painstakingly building a case Aunt Margaret knew she wouldn't live to see finished. And then there was the bombshell from former Judge Harold Winter. His testimony opened a whole new can of worms, shedding light on judicial corruption so deep it sparked a massive Department of Justice investigation. 17 judges were implicated. It wasn't just about the homes, or the land, or the money. It was about justice, about bringing down a corrupt empire and rebuilding a community from the ashes. And as we watched the dust settle, we realized this wasn't just a victory for us. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been wronged by the system. Across 6 states, legal cases were reopened, and hundreds of wrongful foreclosures were overturned. Winters, the man who sparked this wave of change, passed away peacefully in his sleep just 3 months after testifying, finally at peace with his conscience. His funeral saw a heartwarming turnout, with many of the families he'd helped attending, a final act of redemption for a man who had dedicated his life to fixing the wrongs that had plagued so many. The ripple effect of this victory continued to spread far and wide. States began passing new laws to protect homeowners from the overreach of homeowners associations, HOAs. Known as the Jordan Amendment, this law demanded multiple forms of verified notification before any HOA action could impact property rights. Law schools, realizing the importance of the issue, started offering courses on HOA governance and property fraud. And the notorious Emerald Heights case? It became a must-read in ethics classes nationwide, a chilling reminder of how unchecked power and greed can rot entire systems from the inside out. On the anniversary of Melanie's arrest, I stood at the community center, addressing a crowd of residents, local officials, and reporters. This victory belongs to all of us. I began, my eyes scanning the faces that had become so familiar over the past year. To everyone who stood up, spoke out, and refused to let corruption win. To my Aunt Margaret, who saw this coming long before any of us did, and laid the groundwork for justice. And to this community, which chose unity over division and truth over convenience. After the speeches, people mingled and shared stories, and I found myself standing where my aunt's wildflower field had once been. Now, it was a playground alive with the laughter of children. Their parents sat on benches nearby, no longer fretting over mysterious fees or looming foreclosures. Conal walked up, handing me a cold beer. You know, Brian, when you first showed up, some of us thought you were the enemy, he said with a grin. Now look at this place. He waved his hand across the thriving community. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. As the sun began to set over Emerald Heights, I reflected on the journey from that jaw-dropping morning to this moment of peace. The forensic accountant in me appreciated the neat balance of debits and credits, the scales of justice tipping ever so slightly into equilibrium. But the human in me felt something much deeper, satisfaction in the community that had risen from the ashes of corruption. As I walked back to the celebration, I could almost hear Aunt Margaret's voice on the breeze, faint but full of pride. Well done, Brian. Well done, indeed. The wildflowers were gone, yes, but something far more beautiful had taken root in their place. A community built on trust, transparency, and the unshakable belief that though justice might be delayed, it will always eventually find its way. Looking back, I realized Melanie had been right about one thing. She had fallen into a legal trap. But it wasn't one I had set. It was a trap she had carefully constructed herself, one fraudulent document, one forged signature, and one shattered family at a time. In the end, the very laws she twisted to serve her own greed had snapped back with a vengeance, delivering the justice she thought she could escape. Imagine the perfect ending, a story where the heroes come out on top, the villains get their comeuppance, and the community rises up stronger than ever against a system that tried to break them. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is turning the greed of the corrupt into a powerful victory for the people. If you're watching this and have ever found yourself caught up in an HOA nightmare, take this to heart, document everything. Question the powers that be. And never, ever underestimate the power of everyday people who come together to fight back against injustice. This isn't just my win, it's our win. It's the victory of every single person who's ever felt small in the face of a system designed to keep them down. We're living proof that with a little perseverance, clever thinking, and the support of those around you, even the most intimidating Goliaths can be taken down.